Welcome to a special edition of Innovation in Government from the Billington CyberSecurity Summit presented by Carahsoft. I'm Francis Rose. The Acting Chief Information Security Officer of the United States, Michael Duffy, lists his three priorities for this year as enterprise cyber defense, increasing operational resilience, and securing a modern U.S. government. He introduced that list at this conference. Over the next hour, you'll meet leaders from the Office of the Department of Defense Chief Information Officer, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the Department of Health and Human Services, DARPA, and industry that are using leading-edge tools and a highly skilled workforce to secure the government. First, though, a look at what lies ahead in the cyber field. Alex Whitworth, Cybersecurity Solutions Executive at Carahsoft. Thanks for joining me. What are some of the emerging technologies that you're seeing in the cybersecurity space?
Well, thanks for having me. Oh, pleasure to be talking with you today. One of my roles with Carahsoft is I lead a business unit focused on cybersecurity, but I also help lead our partnership with venture capital partners and private equity partners and help accelerate their portfolio companies' entrance into the government market, right? So Carahsoft has long embraced emerging tech and looked for innovation in that sector because we know these are the platforms, these are the great companies that will be in government enterprise-wide in the years to come. And so I get to meet a lot of great companies. And I'll start by talking about AI for a second, right? It really feels like the momentum for AI deployments is here in a big way. And when you think about the convergence of AI and cyber, right, the possibilities, right, the ability to leverage agentic AI to analyze, detect, and then ultimately respond to incidents, right? AI agents collaborating with each other, right? And that dream of a self-healing network really feels like it's close to becoming a reality.
You called out agentic AI in particular. What's the distinction between what agentic AI particularly might mean for cybersecurity versus the more traditional forms of AI that people are familiar with?
Yeah, good question. I think about, right, that ability of AI to drive efficiency, right, and sort of take over the functions that human operators are performing today. And I'll take one potential application of it, right, in the software supply chain security space, right? Imagine the ability to analyze your code base across an enterprise, look for risky or vulnerable code, identify a mitigation, and then deploy an AI agent to remediate that software and get it back to a production standpoint without the need of having a human in the loop. Really interesting to think about, and I think we're right around the corner from getting there.
What's the path to get to that?
I think part of it is trust, right? Trusting these applications, right? Testing them in real world applications and seeing them operate and seeing the successes and also the failures and just getting some more sort of at-bats with that technology. And I think there's companies that are coming out today delivering tech that is in so many different categories of cyber, delivering transformation, right? The ransomware defense space, right? There's technologies capable of automatically detecting ransomware, then hiding your critical assets and tricking the ransomware into thinking that they've found what they were looking for and moving on, right? Or the security awareness training space, right? Teaching an organization's staff how to find or recognize AI generated threats or recognize deepfakes and flag them for the IT operators.
Where are the opportunities, do you think, for companies to come along and fill gaps that exist today?
Well, there's so many opportunities, so many gaps, and I think the government is really trying to accelerate emerging tech's exception and adoption inside of government through things like the FedRAMP 20X initiative, through some of these acquisition pathways like CSOs and OTAs, and leveraging the CSP marketplaces to bring tech in faster. So there's a lot of ways government is trying to bring new technology in and adopt it quicker.
Is that getting easier in your view for the vendor community to approach the government and find ways to kind of get in the door?
I think the sort of mindset and culture around viewing the federal government as a market is shifting in the venture capital space and the private equity space. Right, they're investing in defense tech, they're investing in companies, and they're encouraging companies to build a government practice early, not wait until they've fully developed their commercial practice and then go to government next. So I do think that culture is shifting.
What's the difference that makes for the government professional that somebody is plugged into the government space from a vendor perspective right away?
Oh, it makes a world of difference, right? If you think about, right, these folks are seeing this innovation happening in the broader enterprise space, and they want to have that tech inside of government, but there's been too many barriers to get them access to it, whether it's procurement, whether it's ATO, whether it's different types of compliance. So it really does give them the ability to have the best tech at their fingertips, as soon as possible.
Bob Costello of CISA, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining me. You were telling me before we turned the cameras on that you think there's a lot for you to like about the OneGov initiative GSA is undertaking. What's the matchup for you there?
I think there, as you said, there is a lot to like. And, first and foremost, it's really great as a chief information officer in the federal civilian executive branch to be able to work directly with the OEMs and the cloud providers and the software providers on several initiatives. So as these OneGov initiatives are being announced by GSA, I'm ensuring that my office is stepping right up, looking at them, see how it applies to our technology, and then embracing it for how we can modernize very quickly. We've had very encouraging discussions with Amazon, Microsoft, and several others on their OneGov work, and then being able to start consuming it to modernize our systems, improve our cybersecurity, but most importantly, improve our effectiveness so that we're delivering good quality solutions for the people that have to operate CISA systems and ensuring that we're spending the American people's money wisely.
It's interesting to me that the first thing that a tech guy would want to talk to me about is an acquisition issue. I think people don't think about the synchronization among all of those things in the C-suite often enough.
I think that's a really good point. And I was kind of joking with some mentees the other day. And, when I was coming up, I always wanted to be a CIO. I'm like, that's got to be the job that it is. I didn't realize I would also have to understand acquisition, programmatics, the budgeting cycle. Like we often budget, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years when you get into that type of programming, that future looking initiatives.
Yeah.
So a big part of my job is actually contracting, acquisition, ensuring that we're running those programs efficiently, effectively, that they're delivering value. And that's a total partnership. I always call our contractors partners because we are in a contract together. We have to fulfill both sides of it. But most importantly, we have to make sure as the payers of the contract that we're getting exactly what we've paid for and that everyone understands how the contract is performing.
What's the benefit that you get in that direct dialogue that you talked about with the vendors that you're working with on OneGov, through OneGov?
Absolutely. I think it all comes down to, no matter how much we talk about technology, AI is the next thing. There's nothing better than what we're doing right here and now. And I believe that's in business relationships too. The more steps between you and your supplier can cause problems. It can cause opaqueness, confusion. So this ability to engage directly, I think helps them understand our requirements better. It helps things move a lot faster.
You used a word there too that triggered another thought in my mind. You called them suppliers rather than vendors, and it strikes me you have greater visibility, I bet, into the supply chain that they're delivering to you, and whatever service or product they're delivering to you, you have greater visibility there. Is that a fair assessment?
It is, absolutely. I actually was on a supply chain conversation earlier, and it wasn't about how do we do this in a technological fashion, but how do we build partnerships and trust between the consumers and the suppliers and the people that rely on the products that are delivered. So I absolutely think that, open conversation is one of the most important things. It's why I'm super excited my workforce through several changes recently. One of the things we've noticed first and foremost is being in person drives innovation, drives a different type of accountability and understanding of what other people are working on. And I believe that's in business relationships as well, too. The more we talk, hopefully the more we actually understand what's going on in both worlds and can, work together better.
All right, different kind of supply chain I want to ask you about, and it's my favorite acronym in government, the Software Bill of Materials, the SBOM.
Absolutely.
Where do you stand on working on those kinds of things and ascertaining that you've got one for each thing that you're working on at CISA?
That's a really great question. And I'd love to be able to sit here and say I'm the CIO that figured it all out. I haven't. It's a complex problem. And I think there are correlations to what's happened in other supply chains as we've matured them through big events. The pharmaceutical supply chain is rightly so very strict. We often, I wake up in the morning of that age now, I got a few pills to take. I don't question that those pills didn't go through a process to be manufactured, potentially enter the country through our Customs and Border Protection and the FDA. There's a lot of controls on manufacturing and that process. We understand the ingredient list. What we're trying to do with software is very similar, so that you understand how your software was built, the provenance of that software, and through open source as well too. Sometimes your supplier may not exist anymore.
You're at a really interesting pivot point, I think, in government, Bob, because you're the CIO, obviously, of CISA, so you're responsible for their technical operations. But since you're inside CISA, you see things that are valuable to technology and security leaders all across government. What kind of perspectives does that give you, do you think, on the problems, not just that you have, not just the challenges you have, but that your colleagues all throughout the CIO community and the CIO Council are trying to work on right now?
That's a really great question. And at first, when I've been at CISA now officially 4 years, last week of August. And one of the things that I really try for my office, and we talked about this at several recent conferences. We were out at Black Hat, Chris Butera and I, explaining what CISA's been up to. One of my big motivators is that my office should serve as an example to other CIO offices. That doesn't mean that me and my team are always getting it right or we have no problems. I have problems like everyone else, but that we try and apply the principles that CISA wants other agencies to model, or our partners out in state, local, territorial, and tribal governments or critical infrastructure. So I do sit in a unique space. And in recent months, since around February, we've actually brought my office kind of co-dual hatted between the agency overall and directly working for the cybersecurity division. That has enabled some enormous wins, and for my team to better understand what they need to be successful, and also for me to bring some of our ideas in when we're working on binding operational directives or new guidance. We can serve as a proving ground, a test ground, a gut check. When something might come down, I may be like, CIOs aren't going to react really well to that.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing opportunity for us right now at CISA to, I think, lead in a different way. And just going back to that, always a shout out to my team. It's a big team environment. I honestly believe I have the best possible team out there to tackle these problems right now.
Tiffany Kim, public sector sales leader at Tynes, is here. Tiffany, thanks for joining me. We talked a moment ago, before we turned the cameras on, about automation and orchestration being difficult points for agencies that are implementing zero trust. Why are those two places that agencies get hung up?
Yeah, I think, Francis, first of all, thank you for having me. But I think after organizations have started on that zero trust journey and they've picked off a number of the pillars, you've left with automation and orchestration, and you really are not sure which workflows are most important to your agency, not sure which integrations are most critical. So I think there's a hang up with just getting the organizations behind that, what needs to be done. But we are saying, take that thoughtful approach, right? Spend some time to really understand what the priorities are for the organization and how those workflows and integrations will help.
Mm-hmm. The integration piece of it strikes me as that's a technology thing. That's probably not that hard. Are the cultural issues that agencies are dealing with zero trust kind of the major sore spots?
It definitely is. And I think that's why it's so important to get agency cross-team participation, not only for an adoption perspective, but also just to get those inputs, the better understanding of what is most important to the mission for those particular groups, and getting them leveraging the technology so that they're much more comfortable with it. I think you continue to see more adoption when people understand things more, and that happens with actually using the technology.
Yeah, how are organizations doing in the federal government at doing that, at explaining to the people who shouldn't really have visibility into what's happening, explaining to them what's happening?
Yeah, I think we're at an interesting inflection point, right? There's been a lot of change within the government, and I think we're moving away from, tech-heavy people, right? And there's many more citizen developers. So being able to have frank business and technology conversations, that has to blend. And I think when we are looking at things like automation and orchestration, it's how do you translate that into the layperson's, language, because that is, again, what's going to drive that. So finding a platform that can speak both sides of those languages is really important.
The Defense Department has a pretty hard deadline for achieving operationalization of zero trust. The other agencies have goals and timelines and so on too. How do you advise folks to evaluate themselves, to measure themselves, to make sure that they're staying on track and continuing to make progress?
Yeah, I mean, it is about having those honest assessments and looking to see about the progress that has been made, understanding the priorities for the particular agency and making sure that you're measuring those incrementally so that you can have that self-reflection point to say, hey, we're falling behind here. What can we do to accelerate? What are technologies that could help us with that as well? So it is that constant measurement that's really important here.
Are there places where you've seen agencies kind of really go wrong on zero trust, where they kind of veered off path and have had to course correct?
I think with technology changing as rapidly as it is, right? Like I think we probably all could look back and say, oh, I wish I would have done things a little bit different. But that's part of the excitement of what's happening right now. Technology is evolving so quickly that, we think that, as long as you're evaluating what's happening in the agencies, evaluating what technology is available to you, there's really no too far off the path, right? You have those core values that you're marching to with those pillars, and being able to keep those as the North Star is really important.
What do you recommend to organizations to do to make sure that their architectures and their implementations accommodate some kind of technology coming down the pike that we might not even anticipate today?
Yeah, I mean, you need to pick platforms that are flexible, right? You need to count on the evolution of technology. And so being able to have a platform that's going to be able to work with your tech stack today, but also for those unknowns that are going to come down the pike. So being able to think about that in a way where you are knowing there's change coming.
Tiffany, about a minute left or so. How do you look long-term at what's happening in the zero trust space? At some point in time, these organizations are going to hit their goals for operationalization. What comes next?
I mean, it's never over, right? The adversaries are never going to stop. So there's always going to be that journey for all of our agencies and all of us as technologists to be able to continue to stay ahead of the curve. And I think that's why it's so exciting, especially right now with AI. The technology continues to just move so quickly and we don't know what's coming next, but that gives us great opportunity to continue to innovate and solve really important problems. So it's definitely more to come. Zero trust is never over.
Dan Wallach of DARPA, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you here. What is the Resilient Software Systems capstone, and what will you do with that?
So DARPA has been looking at software for resilient systems. How can we improve software security? And we have a number of programs in our portfolio that have taken different stabs at this problem. The capstone is a series of tech transitions where we're working with our military partners to get this stuff into production. So an example of this, I'm working with Navy submarines, and I can't go into the exact details, but I can tell you that there are some legacy systems and there are some modern systems, and we need to connect them in a safe way. And so we're using some safe parsing technology, which is meant to build what amounts to a firewall that can protect some of the sensitive parts on the inside from some of the parts on the outside. And that's a tech transition that will have a real impact.
Are there common threads in the systems where you have to connect some legacy software with something that's pretty new and cutting edge?
So in the world of software engineering, you never want to start from scratch. You're always taking a legacy system and adding new functions and new features. And so the challenge in software engineering, or really any kind of engineering, is how to achieve what you need to have, but you don't have the luxury of starting from scratch. So we need to incrementally add features while we're incrementally improving security.
There are a couple of other items in your portfolio that I think are really fascinating. Assured micro-patching is what?
So imagine the scenario where you've lost the source code. All you have is the binary. You'd think, that, why would that ever happen? It actually happens relatively frequently. So all you have is the binary that's running on a computer, and it has a bug that you need to fix. Now what? So the point of assured micropatching is to provide the developers better tooling to disassemble, make the change, reassemble it, and have a very tiny set of changes, along with some assurance that they didn't accidentally break something else. Because all you have is the compiled version of the program. How do you know that your change won't have some weird side effects? That's what AMP is all about.
That strikes me as much forensic work as technology work. Is that a fair assumption?
It's really reverse engineering work. And so we want to make it easier to reverse engineer the software to be able to find where you need to fix it.
Another one, SafeDocs. Tell me about SafeDocs.
So SafeDocs is trying to address the problem where the very outside of the software, what we call the attack surface, is typically receiving data from the outside, parsing it in some fashion, going from bits to data, and then it reaches the inside of your program. That's where a lot of the attacks happen. So SafeDocs says, couldn't we write down a specification of the data format? These are the messages, this is a length, this is a color, this is a value, and then have it automatically synthesize the parser in a way that the parser won't be exploitable. It'll just say, that's a message that I don't recognize, sorry, as opposed to that being a source of security vulnerabilities. So SafeDocs did all of that. They built a number of tools that can very efficiently and securely parse data that's coming in from the outside. That's the technology that we're transitioning to Navy submarines right now. And we're looking at a number of other possible transitions.
Are there common threads in these items in your portfolio and the others that we don't have a chance to talk about today in the way that you develop them or the way that users in the department let you know that they need them, so on?
So the thing that all of these have in common is that we're trying to do sophisticated engineering of one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Each of these things, whether it's SafeDocs or AMP, is trying to say, this is a pain point. And how can we use the most sophisticated computer science to deliver tools that can be usable by the defense industrial base to help improve its security?
What overall do you see as the direction that the projects that you're working on are going? What are trends that you anticipate to see?
So the broader trend is, well, really two trends. One is the use of formal methods. It's not enough to say that we've built a tool that seems better than the past. We want to have a tool that we have a formally proven assurance case that this tool will solve a problem and guaranteed not to have new problems. So formal methods is one big trend. The other big trend is, of course, artificial intelligence. How can we use AI tools, which are surprisingly good at writing software? But the problem is that they hallucinate sometimes. So formal methods and AI can play together in a nice way, that we can use formal methods tools to double check that the AI is not hallucinating. That, I think, is where the big trend is going to be.
What will be the key to that interaction and to using that interaction successfully in your view?
So this is an open research problem. How do we take these two completely separate streams of academic thought that have their entirely separate histories for decades, and how do we usefully combine them together? That all by itself is an open research challenge.
Matt Topper, CEO and founder of UberEther. Matt, it's great to see you again. Thanks for joining me. Two different facets of artificial intelligence that people are talking about here. One is using AI to secure their enterprises, and the other is defending, securing the AI tools themselves and the data that is important to them. What are you seeing in either or both of those areas?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of, sadly, the same patterns we saw 10 years ago, right? There's always the hype cycle of something new that's going to come and change the industry. And so there's a rush right now to get all of your data, all of your things into the AI tools. But at the same time, the security standards aren't there, or they're moving so fast that they're not putting the security boundaries around them. So a lot of agencies are actually either putting full blocks on because they don't know how to stop it right now, or they're just letting it go and not realizing kind of what is being put out there. And obviously for some of the agencies, that's extremely risky because they might have the best tech in the world that goes into the AI, and then then that AI vendor uses it to train their next model, and now the whole world has that thing. Or you're taking that data internally and then it gets shared out because now it's left SharePoint or whatever their document repository is with no controls on it, and now everyone can find it. So things like special access programs or like niche pieces of like DHS, weapons of mass destruction, right? All of those things that we've done research on are now in this LLM, and now any Joe that's got access to it internally has it. So we're seeing a lot of the agencies that put the pause going, okay, what are the patterns now? And that's a lot of the things we've been doing lately is saying, okay, you've got human identities that have access to these data repositories, but now you've got a essentially man in the middle machine that has to sit there and follow the same rules as the human. And even though it's got access to petabytes of data, that human that is using it only has this many terabytes, and you've got to keep that filter down. So that's a lot of the implementation we're seeing from that side.
You use the term security standards, and I wonder, are the security standards the same for AI applications as other types of applications, and should they be?
So I always laugh because when there's a protocol called the MCP, Model Context Protocol, that Anthropic put out and kind of the whole industry has glommed on, and it's the new AI APIs, essentially, at the end of the day. And those MPC servers, that first version of the spec, they had the security section. And under the security section was just a note that said to do. Literally, they put it out for the world, and we just haven't figured it out yet. And as you imagine, those were extremely insecure things. And even GitHub, we saw, like, if you use the MCP server and knew how to use it well, you could actually look at anyone's repository, whether you were part of that organization or not. So the first step was getting something called OAuth in there, and then the MCP server basically was acting as a resource and a server. Has not worked very well. There's some holes in it. We saw Shift's drive last week get hacked. That they took the OAuth tokens that were being stored in those servers, pivoted back into Salesforce, pivoted back into Snowflake. A couple other companies came with that. It was about 42 in total. So while that was a good first step, what we're really seeing is the rise of non-human identity and putting short-lived certificates with those connections. So, hey, I might give grant my access to that AI for 6 hours, but then after 6 hours, the certificate's dead and it can't be reused. So if someone was to attack that, they'd have to come back and get the next cert and the next cert and the next cert. And it's way easier to spot someone that has to be there persistently rather than someone that can go in, take the keys and run and use them from somewhere else.
Yeah. What do you see as kind of the trajectory of where security is going in an AI context, Matt?
So it's getting extremely powerful, which is where I'm very, very excited, because we've joked for years that SOC analysts are looking for needles in needle stacks. We're not even in haystacks anymore, right? And you've got to find the one glowing hot red needle in the stack to know your attacker. Well, most SOCs get tens of thousands of alerts a day, and they look at less than 10% of them. There's just not enough people. And you can take the AI models and go, okay, what are the patterns? What are the consistencies? And really filter that down to something that's manageable. And then from there go, okay, I've seen this error or I've seen this pivot. How do I then fix it? And you can use the AI and the different tools, techniques, and practices building in things like the MITRE attack frameworks and pieces that will automatically give the analyst the best approach to stop the attacker in their tracks. So.
Is AI potentially, about a minute left, is AI potentially a tool that will help finally, decades in, cybersecurity practitioners get ahead of the bad guys, or because the bad guys have access to the similar tools, do we continue with the dog chasing the tail?
I don't think we'll ever get away from the dog chasing the tail. It will forever be a cat and mouse game, right? The attackers are incentivized to use the greatest tools to get your money out, get whatever they're trying to extract out, and businesses are enticed to stop them. So we are seeing the LLMs and the models being way better on both the attacker and the defense side right now. One of the first things I saw when AI came out is they were training them on all of GitHub and all of the repositories. And now it's like, well, maybe that's not good because 80% of GitHub is college students trying to code for the first time. Right. It's really badly done. So now I'm seeing LLMs very tightly tuned to SIM, offense, defense, different attack styles at layer 3, layer 4, and they can be highly targeted and smaller at that point to run directly on the analyst machines rather than having these big honkers that nobody can afford and heat up the world for us right now.
Matthew Isnor, Program Lead for Cyber Workforce Development in the Office of the Chief Information Officer, DoD, and Alfredo Rodriguez III, Program Lead for Cyber Workforce Data and Analytics. Welcome to both of you, gentlemen. It's great to have you here. Last time you and I talked to each other, Matt, was at TechNet Cyber in Baltimore back in the spring. And you and your colleague, Mark Gorak, talked to me about some of the work that you're doing in the cyber workforce in the development area. That's kind of paid off some of the things that you've talked about then. How so? What's developed since then?
Yeah, perfect. And thank you very much for having me back. Always enjoy these discussions. So yeah, it's a very exciting time. We've really kind of went to the next level of understanding kind of what our workforce does. As I mentioned before, it's not just cybersecurity, it's IT, it's AI, data, software engineering. It's a whole area of technology people. So what we've been able to do, and this is why this wonderful gentleman to the left of me is here, is starting to understand the data, starting to understand what are the capabilities of the workforce, where they're at. We've started with cybersecurity. Now we're starting to bring in our IT, our cyber effects individuals, starting to understand where their overall requirements are, where their gaps are. And then we've started to push toward this wonderful word called readiness, being able to give that snapshot to our senior leaders, telling them what their capabilities, what they can do on a day-to-day basis, and where they're currently at. We have wonderful ideas of creating heat maps and things going forward, but we want to understand our people and be able to really incentivize them to kind of move forward in their development and be able to kind of grow in their field.
Alfredo, how do you collect the data and how do you then evaluate what you have to get a sense of what your steady state?
Oh yeah, it's been a long endeavor for the last couple of years. The collecting part has been hard. The data is based off the cyber work world, the framework that you and Matt have talked about many times at TechNets. But it comes from the authoritative data sources from the service data centers, their manpower, their personnel systems. We understand how we count them, which has been good. But now we get to finally take that counting and move to qualifying and readiness. And so we understand the posture of the workforce. We know who's out there. We know the kind of skills, the kind of work roles. And now we're shifting using that data to understand if the workforce is actually qualified.
I want to come back to that in a moment, but what are you collecting? What are you counting?
The actual spaces and phases of the work roles. So more than just whether the Army has sufficient number of 25 Bravos, the MOS, or the civilian auxiliaries. We go down to the work role. Are they performing the work? And we use the 3-digit code to understand that, whether they're in that positioned code, and we understand that. And then, now that we know what the position is, we know what the work they're doing, we could then take the next step, which is what we're doing this year, and understanding if they're qualified.
If the services are like they are in other areas, in this area, I imagine you had some kind of a homogenization process you had to go through to make sure that this service's data matched up with this service's data, matched up with this service's data. What was that process like?
The luxury of that is the framework is the same across every service.
Yeah.
So the work that Matt and crew have been doing for the last 5 years is that for example, a 411 in the Army is a 411, in the Air Force is a 411. So as long as we had the same lexicon, the hard part was just getting the different fields and different manpower systems to align. And then once I ingest them into our visualization platform, because the organizing principle is the cyber work code, it's aligned across. Now, it's coming in different forms or fashions from each of the services, but you know what's the same? The code.
What are the tells that you see from the data that Alfredo and his team are presenting to you?
Yeah, so right now we're able to see where our biggest vacancy rates are, where our biggest gaps in overall capabilities with the work roles. The first phase is really the identification. Where are all the people? What are we doing? This wonderful next phase is the important part. It's the readiness. It's the areas where we understand that capability. What can they do? That's going to give even more insight into our senior leaders. So when we have attacks or we have to surge people over to various areas, and that's where Alfredo kind of mentioned, is it's agnostic of, MOS ratings, AFSCs, or OX series. We want to be able to make sure that everyone inside of the services, the components, all have the same capability. So we can surge people back and forth, because at the end of the day, it's one team, one fight. We are all protecting the department's infrastructures. So we got to be able to kind of bring that same to the fold.
Does the data give you the readiness status in and of itself, or does it give you information for you and your colleagues to interpret on a human level? This organization's ready, this one's not.
So currently right now, and this is where we're in the transition phase, it is just giving us a overall understanding of that they are qualified or not.
I see.
Future states into 26 and 27, we're going to build that phase out even more, get understanding into their organizations, into their mission sets, to be able to give those pictures to our seniors. But also it's really for the gaining organizations, the people on the ground. When you report, you want to be able to understand what your people can do. Your commanders and operational people understand that, so they can start leveraging that data and start maneuvering people in those work sections. So it's not necessarily just for senior leaders at the department. We're there to understand and be able to resource, but it's really for the operational people down on the floor to be able to kind of input their information and go forward.
Alfredo, what does the construction of that infrastructure look like in the 26, 27 timeframe to deliver what Matt just talked about?
That's going to be, so right now, like, I can give you the just understanding of how they foundationally qualified, whether they used a cert or training or education, but eventually we're going to get to how they're performing on the job. What things they do and what tools they access, so they understand how they certify the job. So now we have both pictures. Do they have the skills and knowledge to enter the workforce and understand? And can they do the mission? And at what level? And so I'm still at the first phase, working with Matt to draw the second phase out, because once we understand if they have the foundational skills, then we can understand how they're performing at their mission. And like Matt said, that data is not just available where I brief up. It's available for those operational commanders, those division S6s and so forth, to understand the posture of the force, and then where they can tweak at the edges to be a more ready workforce.
Is the data that will be necessary for that information you're already collecting, or will you start to collect new things?
It's going to be new things. This is new territory. Data, for the most part, has only been in the HR side. We're really good at counting. Now we're trying to shift to qualifying, and we're trying to shift qualifying in this construct that Matt and the initiatives are working under 8140. Just beyond, do I have a cert? We need to go beyond that.
And I want to throw, it's kind of us trying to mold two organizations together, the HR people for understanding, and then the readiness people, the ops people. In the past, they've kind of walked by each other, but now we want to make sure that it's all in the same database, it's all in the same kind of reportable information going up, so that we can give the full picture.
Is there a cultural or operational piece to that?
Yeah, so it's a shift in the old mindsets of trying to fix some of the discrepancies and things in the past. It's not without its hurdles, not without its challenges, but I think everyone in the cyber arena is understanding the usefulness. Alfredo's team does a wonderful job of briefing at our senior level engagements to show the usability, what we can kind of maneuver through in the future. So they're all getting excited. They're all understanding the capability, and I think we're going to kind of have not a smoother transition, but it's still going to be, hurdles, but we're going to get there.
We have about 30 seconds left, Alfredo. As you make this transition, how will you measure throughout the course of it that you're on the right track, so you don't get to end state or deadline that you set for yourselves?
What we're seeing, and we've done this now twice, is that the data improves. And I think for the services, and as you understand, they're big services, they're big ships to turn. Once they see that initial set of data, it's such an eye-opening awakening. They start tweaking the process of data collection, which just turns the integrity of the data that I collect even better. And I'm really excited. So we keep turning the ship, and the data just seems to get better and better.
Ron Ringold's Field Chief Information Security Officer for Public Sector at SentinelOne. It's great to see you. Thanks for joining me today. What's industry's role in helping federal government agencies be more cyber resilient, Ron?
I would say our role in helping federal agencies be more cyber resilient is working with them collaboratively to build their requirements into our product. So at SentinelOne, what we do is we include our federal partners in our design period to ensure that we're meeting their federal requirements and achieving those federal cyber requirements, right? The federal government has a law that they need to abide by from a cyber perspective, so FISMA. So what we do is we partner with our FedRAMP, the FedRAMP PMO, with our federal partners to ensure that we're meeting those requirements as we develop new capabilities. And so that not only helps us meet those federal requirements, but then we're also streamlining the compliance aspect. So one of the big burdens in the federal government is doing security assessment authorization. So by building our product with those requirements in mind, we're also streamlining that compliance effort and reducing the level of effort needed to achieve those significant federal authorizations. So yeah, I mean, that's how we're currently helping our federal clients.
What's a healthy collaboration between an industry partner and a government partner look like? What does each side contribute to that relationship in your view?
Oh, that great question again. So what that looks like is we hold quarterly business reviews with our customers. And so within those reviews, we're asking for feedback, not only about the product, so how can we make the user experience better? How can we have more feature-rich product for them? But also what features do they want to see down the line? So we leverage those meetings with our federal customers to see where we need to be headed, not today, but in the next 3 to 5 years. And so by working with them, what they get out of it is a new product. And what we get out of it is meeting those federal requirements and ensuring that we're bringing forth products that the federal government actually wants.
What are the common threads in the feedback that you get in those sessions?
So normally we get tweaks. We would ask to be tweaks on basically some user experience things. So everyone has the flavor that they like. So it depends on who we're dealing with. Like if we're dealing with a threat hunter, they have certain views or certain data points that they want to be able to see within their UX. So depending on who we're talking to in the federal government, it could be more so the user experience. But then when we're getting into some of the architecture discussions with some of these folks, it's more product related and features that they want to see down the road.
What are some of the most popular features that organizations are asking you for now?
So from our side, it's more so about the platform. So previously you would have siloed capability. So you would have your antivirus here, you would have your response actions there, you have your SIM there. So the thing that federal agencies are moving towards now is platform IT. So if you have an EDR vendor that you love, and oh, by the way, they have a SIM capability, now it gives you the ability to have your EDR capability and all of those additional log sources for your SIM in one place, one console, no need to pivot from window to window. You can do all of your cyber operations within one tool.
Given how quickly the technology landscape is changing in the government, how does that impact the way that a company like yours helps agencies think about securing new technologies, evolution in current technologies, and so on?
That's a great question, and that's where the platform comes in. So as these organizations are modernizing and pushing more into cloud, that's actually a great benefit for us because the connections that we can do with cloud driven by APIs is a lot easier on the federal government. So when you talk about getting that information into your data lake or into your SIM, it's more cost effective as they're pushing more into cloud to be able to ingest that information directly into a platform. And then when you couple that with endpoint detection and response, all of that rich data that the SOC needs access to do their mission is all coming into the same place, giving them that one console. So it's streamlining them, giving them a lower level of effort to learn a new tool, and then easier to deploy and get people on board.
We talked a few minutes ago about that collaboration between the industry side and the government side. What does the government do well in a good partnership with an industry partner like you? What makes you say they're really great to work with?
That is the $1 million question, right? So what I see from a good partner is their willingness to collaborate. So being able to meet with us, tell us the things that they need, and then be able to back it up with the reason. So we don't want to build a product that no one is going to procure. So being able to get that feedback of something that not only is important to them, but is important for the federal government, that's the kind of feedback that we're looking for with our strategic partners. So they understand it's not just for them, it's for the entire federal government as a whole. So by them collaborating with us, explaining to us those requirements, it allows us to purpose build for the entire federal government.
When you are talking to folks in government, what are you advising them as you look over the horizon? You should be thinking about this or that thing at some future point.
So the thing now is, of course, artificial intelligence, right? So as we're moving towards the next iteration of what cyber operations is going to look like, the thing that I'm advising our customers on is that autonomous SOC or that agentic AI, being able to do more with your capability, upskilling your workforce, and being able to shift your mean time to detect and mean time to respond to the left, which means we catch the bad guys sooner and get them out of our networks.
Brian Mazanec's Deputy Assistant Secretary in the Center for Preparedness at ASPR at HHS. Brian, welcome. It's great to talk to you again. Thanks for joining me. What's the current state of the cybersecurity landscape for the healthcare sector right now, and how does that inform the way that you at HHS interact with the healthcare sector?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. I think that's a great question. We look at healthcare and public health sector, cybersecurity, and as we look year over year, we're seeing that the threat landscape is only getting worse. We're seeing increasing sophistication, increasing frequency of cyber attacks against healthcare. And we're particularly concerned, while every critical infrastructure sector is important, in healthcare, it touches the lives of every American, and we're focused on patient health and safety. And unfortunately, some of these cyber attacks, particularly the ransomware attacks against hospitals, healthcare delivery organizations, can really threaten patient health and safety and the lives of Americans. So we are very much focused on this threat, but the adversary is using new and more sophisticated technologies, continues to attack legacy medical devices that are obviously spread throughout the healthcare ecosystem. It's really, unfortunately, a lucrative landscape for the adversary. So we are working hard to level up our efforts to meet that threat and protect Americans.
Does the prevalence of ransomware in the healthcare sector mean that you approach the sector differently than other government agencies might approach the sectors with which they work?
I'm not sure if it means we approach it differently. It certainly, I think it increases the urgency because ransomware in particular, we're worried about all cyber threats and protecting intellectual property and those kind of things. But ransomware poses real health and safety issues. If you lock down in a hospital, for example, the radiology, the CT scanners, and you have in an emergency room patients who need critical care, they won't be able to receive it if the doctors in the ER can't use a CT scanner, for example. So there's an urgency there to meet this threat that I think may be a little more pronounced and timely than for some of the other critical infrastructure sectors. But we do work with our federal partners across those other sectors, share best practices. There are some areas of commonality as well, but ransomware is driven by the financial incentives for these bad actors. And unfortunately, healthcare pays. A lot of these hospitals have ransomware coverage, and we'll see ransom demands. They're not dumb. They know that there's coverage. They know what the coverage often will be. We'll see ransomware demand letters that will be exactly at the payout amount of the particular victim's coverage. So as long as you have these perverse incentives and it's a sector that pays because of the importance of protecting patient health and safety, it's really a dire threat that we're trying to level up to meet.
Is there a role for your team or for other teams across government to try to take action or advocate for action that will change that incentive structure?
Absolutely. So I think part of the way you change the adversary calculus is just by hardening the sector. So we've identified a little over a year and a half ago, we put out healthcare and public health specific cybersecurity performance goals. We call them government acronyms, CPGs. CISA has put out, there's all sector, cross-sector CPGs, but we created, based on our work with the sector and what we had seen, tailored CPGs that identify the 10 highest impact practices that healthcare entities can implement to immediately harden their systems and increase their resiliency, which will affect that adversary calculus. Of course, there are other things we can do too, and certainly other parts of government are taking more offensive measures to go after these adversaries. We work very closely with the FBI and others, and they have a very different but critical role in affecting that as well. But it's really a team effort across the federal government and with the private sector too. We have really robust private sector partnerships that are also really important.
You saw my next question coming, Brian, and that is, who are your partners across government? Yeah. You mentioned FBI. You talked about partnerships earlier. I imagine CISA is another organization that you work pretty tightly with.
I mean, so first of all, the partnerships begin within just HHS. So the organization I sit in, the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, we serve as kind of the quarterback or a coordination node for the department, particularly from an incident response perspective. But there's so many other parts of HHS that play absolutely critical roles. The Office of the Chief Information Officer, FDA has a medical device cybersecurity regulatory role. CMS is so directly involved in healthcare across the nation and has a really critical role there. So we coordinate just within the department with really dozens of partners on a daily basis. And then within the federal interagency, as I mentioned, FBI, from a law enforcement perspective, really going after the bad actors. They're critical partners. Often a victim will first engage, because the FBI has the lead in federal response, they'll first maybe engage with the FBI or CISA, but the three of us quickly work together to bring our different tools in our toolkit to bear. Our role at HHS is really hardening the sector, helping it improve its cyber resiliency, and then in an actual incident response role, we're focused on mitigating patient health and safety impacts. So we have unique tools we can bring. In addition to the role FBI is playing from a law enforcement perspective, CISA may be playing from a technical cyber perspective. We can bring certain tools and resources to basically prevent loss of life or really adverse impacts on patients.
You mentioned you interact too with organizations across government that perform similar functions in liaison with other sectors. And I think of CISA, the office at the Energy Department first. What does that collaboration look like? How do you, what do you exchange among yourselves to understand what's going on in other sectors that might be coming to yours?
Yeah, so we talk, we focus a lot, and there's obvious touch points of critical cross-sector dependencies. You mentioned CISA, energy. You can't run a hospital very long without power, without water. Wastewater is another critical infrastructure sector with EPA. So we work closely on a regular basis with those sectors because there are mutual points of interest. And then CISA, on behalf of all of the critical infrastructure sectors and as the national coordinator, brings us together on a regular basis to work on those broader cross-cutting issues that affect every critical infrastructure sector. So we're fortunate to have CISA playing that role as a key partner as well.
Okay, final thought. What's the long-term view? What are you paying attention to now that might not be on the radar screens of the folks that you deal with in the healthcare sector today, but you're helping to educate them or prepare them?
Yeah, well, I don't know if this is not on the radar. I think everyone's talking about AI, but really the technology changes, what it means from a workforce perspective, what kind of skills we need and that the sector needs to deal with evolving threats that are just moving at a scale and speed with automation, with large language models that are changing the game and the calculus. And really, we're trying to do a lot of work to help the sector grapple with that. Again, I think that's on the radar too, but it's a wicked problem that we need to work together on.
Justin Valdes, thanks very much for joining me. It's great to have you here. What are the priorities that you're seeing agencies bringing to you that they're having, and what are you advising them they should be thinking about that maybe they're not prioritizing?
Yeah, some of the biggest priorities we're seeing is closing the gap between some of these compliance structures like zero trust, some of these frameworks, and some of these rich areas where there's mandates or their executive orders, but they don't have the increased budget. They're looking for optimization and efficiency. At Menlo Security, what we do is we're able to provide a really good sticking point and a glue between those systems, and we are the pioneers of browser security and browser enhancements and isolation today. So with that, as far as like a priority is, where do we make all these components come together? And through the power of isolation, we're able to fill a lot of those gaps because browser security isn't a tremendous requirement these days. It is growing in space. It's, I think industry reports it's a multi-billion-dollar industry today, probably 3.5 million by 2028. And the attack surface is exposing that 40 to 45% of attacks these days, with the latest studies, are through browser exploits or browser vulnerabilities. So the way we're able to deliver that through the cloud or on a network device to be able to provide those enhancements is really filling in the gaps in those systems today.
What are the gaps that need to be filled, and how so?
Well, a lot of agencies or organizations are investing in all these tools or platforms that say zero trust, but then there's a lack of interoperability. And we've heard organizations, agencies say we have all these zero trust devices, but we're not any closer to that zero trust model. So in introducing isolation, it provides optimized access and a clean cybersecurity surface to allow users to have the open, dirty internet at their fingertips, but without the touch point of the vulnerability to the network or the endpoints that are accessing the internet.
I like the phrase open, dirty internet because it's really what it is. Even in areas that are not necessarily forbidden, they're still kind of rough, and you don't exactly know what's behind the code that people are accessing. Is that the kind of the premise?
Oh, of course. I mean, these days, agencies and organizations are realizing that a firewall or a web gateway just isn't enough these days. There's exploits or vulnerabilities that they can expose, code that they can eject, and we're, especially with AI and the growth and the advancement of that, so we're seeing the next generation of being able to provide that layer of security that allows access, but still give you the security controls as necessary.
You anticipated my next question, which is how does AI complicate this situation?
Oh yeah, speed and efficiency of the attack framework and the surface, right? So these days exploits, can get built up and shut down, and we're seeing that in the DoD, we're seeing that in civilian, we're seeing that across SLED spaces and major enterprises. There's the speed at which things are adapting to be able to be an attack surface or malware mutations. It's accelerating at a great pace, and we have to be able to keep up with it.
Mm-hmm. What should the organizations themselves do to try to keep pace with the threat landscape? And then what's the role of somebody like you to be able to help them?
Isolation, right? Segmentation, isolation, and again, back to browser security exploits. It's a real big blind spot in the industry across private sector and public sector. So being able to introduce isolation security tools, and right now there's a lot of enhancements that are kind of immature that are within some of these SASE platforms that are not all there. We've been doing this for 13 years. We're advancing to the next levels of isolation, the power of it. So being able to introduce those capabilities that are interoperable is the best way to safeguard some of these advancements that are taking off faster than the speed of light.
What's the trend line look like in your area? What should organizations be thinking about in this realm that might not be a threat to them today, but is over the horizon?
Taking the browser security story serious, right? There's a lot of vulnerabilities and exploits that still don't get patched by your major browser providers, and we're not suggesting go replace your browsers. That's going to be a whole nother nightmare to try to manage. It's introducing other agents you'd then have to segment and operate, and it becomes a nightmare. What we do that's proprietary to us is we're able to take those commodity browsers, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, and no matter what pace you're able to keep up with those, we're able to contradict what those vulnerabilities may be within that space. So what we're able to do is deliver that through the cloud rather than saying replace the things that are already free within your environment.
Justin Valdes of Menlo Security on Innovation in Government. Thanks for joining me for this Innovation in Government program presented by Carahsoft. If you missed any part of this program, you can watch the show in its entirety on our website at fedgovtoday.com or the FedGov Today YouTube channel. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks very much for watching. Good night.